I've always wondered about consciousness and the universe, even as a kid. I remember thinking when I was quite young, what's the speed of thought? And I was a little bit older than that when I was playing Yahtzee, and I said to myself, if there's a God, let me get a Yahtzee and then I'll believe. And what do you know? 5 fives come tumbling out of the cup. Now, the chances of having this happen at all are 1 in 1,296. So obviously it does happen, but that it happened directly after I asked for it to happen was pretty notable to me. I knew, however, that it might have just been luck. And then the years went by, and still filled with wonder and awe, nature, universe, the mind, just always been very interested in those kinds of things. So in that sense, I was prepared as much as I could be for the day many, many years later when synchronicity would come cascading into my life again. I was 29 years old, and this time it left no doubt that something outside of myself, something I came to call the other intelligence, was saying something and answering some of the lifelong questions that I'd been asking, and much, much more. But that part of the dialogue we'll get to. The first hello, however, really set the stage, so let's start there. It was early 1995. I'd been reading up on crop circles, especially intrigued by stories of people who were finding that crop circles would show up in places or in shapes that kind of answered a private thought of theirs, like that would be a good place for a crop circle. Wouldn't it be great if this shape showed up, and so on? And it would happen. So one day when I was taking a class at the university called, I think it was Introduction to the Internet. I mean, this was 1995 and the World Wide Web was still a dinosaur. This was before Google, after all. But the assignment anyway was to email someone sort of famous and report back to the class what happened. So I decided to email Noam Chomsky, who was a linguistics professor at MIT, and I was going to ask him what he thought about the language of crop circles. I mean, after all, if many people were having a thought or a wish about crop circles and then a fitting crop circle would appear, then this phenomenon clearly supported the idea of an actual dialogue. And dialogue implies a language, words, syntax, and so on. So I was pretty excited about the assignment and getting in touch with Noam Chomsky. So anyways, after class, I headed over to the university library and I was just doing some other research. I was walking past rows and rows of bound periodicals, and what catches my eye is the word encounter on one row of books. So they weren't recent books, they were kind of old, and I'd never heard of Encounter, so I just pulled one off the shelf and flipped it open. And the first words I see are Noam Chomsky. So, I guess I got my answer. My pulling the right book off the right shelf, opening to the right page, and looking at the right place on the page to see those words was, to me, that meant my own encounter was intended to convey that synchronicity is itself a language, a way to communicate between dimensions, apparently. So I couldn't see it yet, but this was just the start of what quickly became a clear dialogue. There were clear topics, clear themes that arose out of the upcoming synchronicities, and that's what we'll be getting into. But before we can really think about the implications of this first interaction, let's consider that when synchronicity happens and other intelligence or other consciousness is involved, that's apparently omniscient, that is all-knowing and all-powerful. And so we may be inclined to think of it as God or Allah or higher mind or cosmic consciousness or panpsyche, Jesus, even DNA, sacred geometry. Everyone's got a right to their own language and their own thought processes and their inner beliefs. But keeping God in a box is just divisive. And for the purposes of a discussion about the content of the synchronicities I'll be talking about, I suggest the more inclusive term, G in brackets, to signify, the private, ineffable concept of what God or God-like consciousness is outside of ourselves. Because let's face it, nobody really knows. Besides, it's a great symbol for God let out of the box. Now, the 20th century seemed to see the beginnings of synchronicity. And now in the 21st century, many, many more people are having increased numbers of synchronicity. Synchronicity, it seems to be accelerating our spiritual transformation. I'm not the only one to think that, but other people are getting that same impression. So, and many of us have been in the flow for years, even decades, as synchronicity becomes a guiding force in our lives. Others are just now coming to synchronicity. It's fine. At whatever stage you're at, I think that the only thing that you need is some degree of spirituality. You don't have to be religious. It just requires some degree of spirituality to even attract synchronicity. I mean, nobody wants to talk to a wall, right? G included. So believe it to see it. I don't consider the synchronicities to be exclusively relevant to any one particular belief system. Whether someone simply adopted the religion they were born into, they maybe found another faith, or they're still seeking, or they have decided that there's no other consciousness out there, whatever it is, that's not going to work here, nor will arguments or bullying. So we're talking about normal and natural human experiences because we all have the potential to communicate with G. We can either take steps in that direction, or we can close our eyes and turn away. In the next episode, I'll share the synchronicities that started back in 1995. This was before Google, in fact. So these synchronicities were just the start of a journey that's come a quarter of a century now. And we're going to delve into topics like special properties of DNA and the physics of contact, how it actually happens. It's really amazing to watch theoretical physicists catch up to the master class that this dialogue has been for the last 25 years. So they're catching up just in time, really, to catch the wave of 21st century synchronicity and the spiritual evolution we may choose to embark upon. So please hit the subscribe button for more of the dialogue in new episodes each week. Thanks for listening.